Greetings from Hillsboro, Oregon. My name is David Wilkins, and I have a new toy I'd like to share with you. This is an EWI USB. I've had it for a few weeks now, and I'd like to share some things that I've discovered about this instrument with some other folks that are also in the same position I'm at learning this thing, because there's some interesting things about it that are totally unique to this instrument or this type of instrument, because there are several versions of this. Looking around on the internet and YouTube for videos for information can be very hit and miss. I found a lot of good stuff, but there's little bits and pieces of it everywhere, so I thought I'd try to get a little bit of it together here. Hopefully making the video that I was looking for, a couple 3 weeks ago when I first got this thing. So the fingering patterns on this, if you look in the manual that comes from Akai with this thing, it gives you one set of fingerings. It doesn't even touch the surface of what's actually possible on this instrument. Matt Traum at Patchman Music, patchmanmusic.com, has put together a really nice compilation of what's really possible with this machine. This is like 9 pages of fingerings of, how many different, there's 5 ways how to play a B on this machine, and that's not necessarily even a fully complete. So a somewhat more complete listing, it says. So patchmanmusic.com, look for that. Also, one of the other websites that I found that's very helpful, it actually covers some of the information that I'm going to cover today, is Brett Pimentel, BRETPIMENTEL Woodwinds at brettpimentel.com. He also discusses the fingering system of this, but he also covers a whole lot of other things. He's got a great fingering diagram builder, and he talks about saxophones, clarinets, and oboes, and he plays all of that stuff, which I don't. So go check Brett's site out. It talks about this a bit. You have to look through the blogs, do some searches on his site. But there's some really cool information. Go check that out. Anyway, so EWI USB. We're going to start with a C major scale. And that's one of the first things is this key. I hit it a lot. I'm still learning how to not do that. So that's something that beginners have to worry about, is making sure you're just holding the thing right. The octave keys on the back here, I'm not going to talk about those other than say that they're there, because this is the only thing that this thumb does is those octave keys. Any other instrument, you've got all kinds of other interesting possibilities. If you ever played bassoon, you know that there's like 6 or 7 things that you can do with that thumb. Being able to do that with, like, I play recorders, and being able to do some other things I'm finding I can't do on this. But that's okay, because there's a lot of other things I can do, and it's been very exciting to learn how to play this thing. So again, C major scale, starting with 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that key down there, which is on the fingering chart. This is the basic fingering. Notice that C is this way. If you take that finger off, it's a C sharp. Because this thing is not acoustic, but it's based on acoustic instruments, it has some interesting quirks to the fingering system that you don't normally think about on a like a saxophone or clarinet or oboe, whatever, because those fingerings, working on the acoustics of the instrument, you know that you put down one finger, the next finger, the next finger, because you have to close the tube down to get the different notes. There's no tube, there's no acoustics on this thing. It's all electronics, which means there's a brain in here, and it has to do math. So we're going to figure out what the math is, because that's the kind of geek that I am. I wanted to know what the math was behind this thing. So let's start with that C sharp, which is the basic note. And it does math from there. So C, that's a half step down. That's 1 half step, which means this key does -1. Easily enough. From that C sharp, if we put down the first finger, we get B, which is a whole step, or -2. And here comes the first interesting bit. If you that was a half step, but from B, you're expecting to play A. which you do. So now that's 2 steps. That's 2 half steps, but it only played 1 half step before. Why? Part of the reason of the acoustic properties of an instrument would make it do that. So the programmers had to come up with rules on how to make that work. So the rule is the second key here is a -1 key unless and except if you're holding this one. So if you push the first key down, this now becomes a -2, and it's regardless of whatever else you do on the instrument, those 2 keys are interrelated to that. So now I'm touching other things again. So like, for example, if I put down some fingers on the bottom here, and I did this, there's that half step, but those 2 whole steps. So no matter what I'm doing down here, those rules apply. And what I just did sequentially is one of the really cool things about this instrument. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, second key is related to the first key because it changes the note or the rules, but it works the other way too, because if you think about this, if I play a C and then I add this finger down, you expect, oh, that's a -2, but you're going from C to A, and that's actually 3 half steps, minor third. So there's another rule. This key by itself is a -2, but with this key, it's a -3. And again, no matter what else we do on the instrument, those 2 rules always apply. So again, really cool things you can do with sequential things. So -2, -3. So let's go the rest of the keys down here. So from A, we would expect G. That's a whole step. Okay, that works. G to F, yep. Now, what happens if I move the G key? The third key. We're not necessarily going to call it a G key because eventually it's not a G anymore. There's another minor third because this would be A. This gives you now a half step, but those 4 keys together gives you F. So from A, half step down G sharp or A flat down to F. So there's that another minor third. So this works the same way. The third key here, the left hand third key, changes when you have the right hand first key down. It goes from whole step 2 to minor third 3 down. Same thing as this one did. So these 2 relate the same way. 1 goes to 2, 3 relates to right hand 1. So minor third and a minor third. And also, because 1 and 2 work together, 3 and 4 also interact with each other. Because if you have 1 and 2 and you put down this one, you get a half step. There's that key again. But 1, 2, and 3, you add 1, it's a whole step. So this key makes it 2 minus 2. Picking it up turns it into just 1. So you can do a half step trill here. Anywhere on the instrument. But you put that one down, now it's a whole step. So those are the four that actually do different things with the other keys. The rest of them pretty much don't, with a couple of exceptions. So from F to E, half step. That one only does that. And again, half step from any other combination. Okay. E down to D, whole step. There you go. And I use this one. Still a half step, which is really important. I'll show that in a minute. So those are those keys. We played the C with this one before. So D to C, that's a whole step. So that's the -2, which is consistent with pretty much all of the acoustic instruments that these are modeled on. The next key up here is half step up from that. So it's a -1. And the key above here on saxophones would have been the E flat key. So it's actually a +1 key from D. Oops. MIDI's a lovely thing. So again, hitting this one because I'm trying to show you this one. Half step up or down. Well, actually up, because this is a +1 key. Makes everything go up a half step. This key up here does the exact same thing. It's a +1. And you can even do it if you're careful. Like I said, I'm being not careful and I keep hitting it, so obviously it makes it pretty easy to do it this way. You can rock it. Makes it a really easy trill key too. So you've got +1, -1, -2. The keys up on this side, you've got another +1. Because on a saxophone that would have been a G sharp. So from G to G sharp it raises at a half step. It still does that, but it does it for everything. Okay, this one down here is a -1, so it's a half step down. Now, the fun part comes when you add all of them together. The lowest note within any octave group, because we're going to call it an octave because it's obviously much lower than that. We're going to add a couple notes on either end of it. You can play the bottom two keys together by splitting the difference. If you add that one down there, so you have C, B, this is how you get the B flat. Okay, I'm doing that. And that's the lowest note you can get, and with the rollers, that low B flat. So there's only one key I haven't talked about, and that's this little funky one here in the middle. On a saxophone, that's a B flat key. In French, they call it the bis key. I haven't really found a good use for that yet. I'm not a saxophone player. Like I said, I come from recorders and trombones and crumb horns and other interesting medieval and Renaissance instruments. But I have played saxophone occasionally. I used to own a couple. And on an acoustic instrument, that key makes sense because that's where you have to put it to make that key. And there's a couple. This is one of the innovations they came up with for saxophones to make that note sound right, and to be able to do it. And on mechanical keys, it's pretty easy to move your finger down to hit that one. On this thing, you can do a roll kind of thing. That's kind of the way it's designed, so you can just kind of. So it's a -1 key, and it's there for saxophone players because they're used to having one there. The rest of us don't necessarily care. But the thing about that note, that particular key is, again, it plays -1 for almost everything. except if you put down the second finger. Octave key. If you have 1 and 2 down, it disables that key. It doesn't do anything anymore. And from a saxophone point of view, you wouldn't expect it to do anything more because while you got the A key down, you're going to be playing things lower, and you don't want that key to be up because that would mess up everything else. So they programmed that in. But if you're doing any other combinations of things, you can do, as long as you don't have both of those together, you can use it. Or it works that way. But if you put that one down, it don't do nothing. So know that. So we've touched on a little bit of everything. So we've got -2 or -3, depending on whether you use this one. This is a -1 or -2 if you have this one down. This is -2 or -3 if you have this one down. This is a -1 or -2 if you have this one down. Those are the exceptions. Those are the changes. -1, -2, +1, -1, -2, +1, +1. Oh, and that's the other really big exception. This +1 and this +1 are mutually exclusive. You cannot use both of them at the same time. Once you play one, it disables the other. See? So it's a half step up. It's a +1. And depending on which hand you're using on, you can use either one, but you can't use both of them at the same time. So that brings us also to one other point. On most of the fingering charts, the highest note they show is a D. So from that C sharp, you add one of these. But there's a +1 down here also. Remember that the E flat key? It's not really an E flat key on this thing. You put two of those together, you get an E flat. So there's an E flat up there. It's really awkward to do that without anything else holding on. You got to have a neck strap with this thing because of the other things that you have to do with this thumb. But that note does exist. So if you're using something, and I have a hard time finding it, which is part of the reason why I don't use it very often. So it's there. Don't know how usable it is, but that's the thing. So now we come to the fun part about this instrument. The different combinations you can use for things, as I've noticed throughout this thing. I've been doing some oddball things. But being able to do sequential things and do them up step, down step makes for some really interesting things you can do when you're soloing. For example, G, A, B, just really easy scale. Now do that in A flat. And without having to think, half step up, just pick a +1 key, push it down, touch it, and now you're in A flat. And add the other one. Where is it? Yeah. So now we're in A. Instant transposition. Now that's the one that doesn't work because of the 3-1 rule where it changes it. So, but down here. All kinds of fun. Fun like that. Okay. Other things, again, doing the math in your head, the computer does it for you. You don't have to worry about it. But you can come up with some really bizarre things. For example, you don't have to go straight up and straight down. You can go backwards from that. It's all a matter of pluses and minuses, and what order you do them in is irrelevant to the computer. And that's kind of the fun thing about this, because it gives you so many different possibilities. For example, you notice I've been having a hard time finding that E flat key, that little one down here. But from F, E flat's a whole step. That's a -2. I've got 2 other -2 keys I can use instead of having to fumble around trying to find that thing. So either one of those makes a perfectly fine E flat. And even better than that, coming from this E flat to F, you're moving 3 fingers. Either one of the other ones, you're moving 1. So that's the other versatility of this instrument, is you can come up with those other options that are going to be a lot faster eventually once you get them under your fingers, and so much more easier to play, quicker. Brett has a long discussion about Trill Fingerings, and that's part of the issue, is being able to do, for example, G to A flat. One of the scale things that I've found that's kind of easy, if you're going, say, you want to play G, A, B, C, D. Kind of awkward from the C to the D, because you got to add a half step from the C sharp, right? Standard finger C is here. So you add 1 and do this. But if you start for G, A, B and then add the +1 down here, you've already done the math differently. So from B to C is a half step, so you can add the half step here instead of moving this. And then when you take this finger off, you're adding the whole step from the C to the D. All right. Same thing down there with that E flat. And again, whichever one, -2 finger comes up, it still works. Now we're in B. And B flat minor. Ready? Or not. So those are all the fun things you can do with this, and probably a whole lot more. My name's Dave Wilkins, and I've been enjoying this whole, I hope a little bit of this was either entertaining